Start by folding the fabric right side to the center. On the left side, you will lay the templates. The edges of the material should be directed towards the center line. Adjust the width of the folded fabric to the width of the front and back templates. Check if the fabric is folded evenly by taking a control measurement at several points. Then, lay out the template, putting the center of the front on the fold of the needed fabric and pinning everything carefully. Use a tailor's chalk or marker to mark the seam allowances according to the values given in the cutting layout plan. Carefully cut out the pattern along the marked lines. Repeat the steps, lay out and cut out the form of the bag. Then, fold the remaining fabric in half, right sides together. Lay out the sleeve, remembering to check the straight thread. Pin everything together. Add seam allowances and cut out the shape. From the remaining fabric, cut out the hood form 2 more times on the folded fabric. Remember to keep the thread straight, of course. Then 2 cuffs, cut 1 time on the folded fabric. And 4 pocket bags, cut 2 times on the folded fabric. Before unpinning the paper templates, remember to mark the notches according to the markings on the patterns. Proceed to sewing the sweatshirt with a seam on the shoulders. Pin the front and back right sides together and stitch them. If you are sewing using an overlocker, use a 4-thread stitch. If you are using a sewing machine, sew the fabric first with a stretch stitch and then finish it with an overlock stitch. Then, press the seams to the back. Unfold the sewn piece and proceed to pinning the sleeve. Lay the material right sides together. Start the pinning with aligning the notches. The notch in the middle of the sleeve should be at the shoulder seam. The second notch, on the other hand, marks the fit with the front of the sweatshirt. Pin everything together carefully . Then sew in the sleeve. Repeat the process while sewing in the second sleeve. Press the seams towards the sleeve. Proceed to hem each edge of the sleeve individually, including the side AI4 lengths in total. Trim the straight edges of all elements of the pocket bags. Mark notches marking the location of the pocket opening with pins. Cut 4 stripes of foaming tape, slightly longer than the marked sections, and tape the pocket openings on the front and back of the blouse, pressing the tape with an iron. Proceed to sew the sides of the sleeves and blouse together with one seam, leaving openings for sewing in the pockets. When pinning, carefully align the seams. Remember to properly mark the pocket opening, which marks the beginning and the end of the stitch. The side should not be stitched all the way to the edge of the bottom. Leave a slit. After pinning everything carefully, move on to sewing 1 cm from the edge. Sew 2 seams with bar tacks at the beginning and end. Repeat the steps on the other side. Spread the edges of the seams at the point of the pocket opening, remembering to position the pocket in the right direction, relative to the bottom of the sweatshirt. Lay one part of the pocket piece with the right side of the fabric together with the right side of the seam allowance. Pin it, align the notches together and sew, starting and finishing the stitch about 1 cm from the edge. Leave space for sewing the pocket elements together. Pin the other side of the pocket evenly and sew up to the seam allowance on the other side. Understitch the pocket element sewn to the front of the sweatshirt, sewing it together with the seam allowance a millimeter from the seam edge. Pin the 2 pocket piece elements together. and stitch them together all the way around, bar tacking at the beginning and end of the seams. Repeat all the steps with the second pocket. Fold the cuff's right sides together and sew them. Press the seams to the sides and fold the cuff in half, left sides together. Sew the folded cuff a few millimeters from the edge with an auxiliary seam to make it easier to sew the cuff to the sleeve later. Repeat these steps with the second cuff. Fold the two hood elements right sides together. Pin the semicircular side and stitch, bar tacking at the beginning and end of the seam. Repeat with the other two elements. Cut the seam allowances 6 to 7 millimeters deep in several places on the curve of the hood. Press them to the sides so that the center seam fits nicely. Fold the outer and inner hoods right sides together. Pin the front edge, align the seams and edges. Sew them. Turn the hood to the right side. Press. Mark the tunnel stitching line 2 cm from the edge on the front of the hood. or baste the elements together. And sew them with a straight stitch to form a tunnel. If you would like to pull a string through it, you would need to line the place for the holes marked on the pattern and make them using the sewing machine or set special eyelets there before sewing the tunnel. Next, sew the bottom edges of the hood together using an auxiliary stitch or basting. Pin the edges of the hood so that they slightly overlap, then stitch them together using a sewing machine. Put the hood inside the sweatshirt, folding the pieces right sides together. Proceed to pin the hood to the neckline, starting from the notch in the middle of the front. Then, align the seam in the center of the hood with the notch in the center of the bag, and the shoulder seams with the notches on the hood. Pin the remaining parts together and sew on the hood. Finish the stitch by knotting or pulling the threads. Now, let's move on to pinning the cuff. Fold the sleeve and cuff in half. Mark the center with a notch or tailor's chalk. Then tuck the cuff into the sleeve and pin it, aligning the notches. Sew on the cuff, stretching it to the width of the sleeve as you sew. Repeat on the other side. Press the seam allowance towards the sleeve. Hem the bottom edge of the sweatshirt on the front and back. Baste the bottom of the sweatshirt together with the slits according to the width of the seam allowance you added for the fold when cutting. Lay the slit allowances on top of the bottom allowances. Finish the entire fold using the sewing machine. Unstitch the basting. Iron your finished sweatshirt.